From the opinion pages of the Wall Street Journal, this is Potomac Watch.
A New York jury acquits Daniel Penny for killing Jordan Neely in a subway car last May. Meantime, Hunter Biden's pardon has others in Washington asking, "What about me?" raising the prospect that President Biden might grant mass clemency to political allies and members of his administration. Welcome, I'm Kyle Peterson with the Wall Street Journal. We're joined today by my colleagues, columnists Bill McGurn and Kim Strassel. After 4 days of deliberations, a jury of 12 of Daniel Penny's peers, 7 women and 5 men, acquitted him of the charge of criminally negligent homicide for his intervention on the New York subway train on May 1st, 2023, painted by some as a hero, others as a vigilante. Let's listen first to New York Mayor Eric Adams at a press conference on Monday.
We have a mental health system that is broken. When you have someone repeatedly going through that system, that's a signature of failure. And we need help in Albany and in the city council. We can't sit back and mourn the loss of someone that is caught up in this system when we're not taking the action every day. But a jury of his peers heard the case, saw all the facts and all the evidence, and made a decision. And I joined DA Bragg in stating that I respect the process.
Bill, what do you make of this verdict? And maybe the place to start is just to remind listeners of what happened on the subway that day.
Well, what happened, Daniel Penny was coming back from school in Manhattan, riding the subway. Jordan Neely got on. He's a man with a history of mental illness, suffered some real tragedies. His mother was brutally murdered when he was very young, and addiction to drugs and so forth. And he got on and he made threatening noises. And I think these are big threatening noises because some of the people reported they were terrified. And I think there's been 8 murders on subways this year. So there's a lot of trouble out there. And Daniel Penny got up and subdued him with a chokehold. And the problem is he held it too long, according to the medical examiner, and Jordan Neely died. So he was originally charged with 2 charges. More serious was second-degree manslaughter. And then there was the second lesser charge. Like if the jury didn't want to find him guilty of the main charge, go to the lesser charge, criminally negligent homicide. What happened was on Friday, the jury told the judge they were deadlocked, could not come to an agreement on the first charge. And the judge, instead of declaring a mistrial for the whole case, over the defense's objection, he told the jury to go back and reconsider the second charge. They're throwing out the first charge, which the prosecutor wanted and Daniel Penny's lawyers didn't want. And the reason is no one thought the jury was going to come back with an acquittal. But on Monday it did. It acquitted him of the second charge. And at the end of all this, I agree with a lot of former prosecutors say this is a case that never should have been brought in the first place. This is what prosecutorial discretion is. There's no way you're going to advance justice with the conviction of Daniel Penny, treating him like a criminal. And instead, what you did is send the message to people when they see someone else in need, just sit down, stare at the floor until your stop comes and get off. But whatever you do, don't get involved.
Here for the record is the statement from the office of Manhattan District Attorney Alvin Bragg. As with every case, we followed the facts and the evidence from the beginning to the end. A grand jury voted to indict, and the office carefully presented this case to a trial jury. Over the course of the trial, we introduced medical records, videos, body cam footage, and testimony from over 30 witnesses, including from the city's office of the chief medical examiner. The jury carefully deliberated for 4 days. They requested readbacks of testimony and asked for video footage to rewatch, as well as written definitions of the law. Their lengthy deliberation and the totality of the facts and the evidence underscored why this case was put in front of a jury of Mr. Penny's peers, unquote. Kim, attempt there by the Manhattan DA's office, it seems to me, to justify bringing this case at all, trying to make the argument that the jury long deliberated over this, so clearly there was some ambiguity. But is it wrong to see this as a pretty solid rebuke of the case and the Manhattan DA's choice to bring it? Because remember, this was not a hung jury. This was not a jury that could not come to a decision either way. where there's some people on each side, people in the jury room seeing it from different perspectives. This was an acquittal.
Yeah, this is obviously a huge rebuke of Alvin Bragg. And I thought that statement that you read was really fascinating because even with all of that, I mean, I thought that statement undermined his point. Even it took all of that and they gave everything they could at this case. And this jury of his peers voted to acquit him on the lesser charge as well. Because let's remember, it was the prosecutors who asked that that first charge be dropped because they then assumed that they would get a slam dunk on the lesser one. And I think the problem here for Alvin Bragg is this case simply failed the common sense test, right? And that's the problem any prosecutor faces when they're sitting down, because the jury is made up of people, and we'd like to think the average American juror has an element of common sense. I mean, they're also being instructed to look at the law, and you have to look at the environment in all of this happened. This was quite a stunning statistic to me. Back in January of 2022, Michelle Go, who was a 40-year-old banker, was shoved in front of a subway car. And from that day until October of the following year, 37 more people riding the New York subway system were shoved off a platform. Then you're on the cars. There's less of a police presence. People are being murdered, as Bill noticed. 9 of those 11 witnesses who testified at the trial said that Neely's behavior on that train that day was the scariest thing that they had ever experienced on a subway car. That's the context around all of this. A lot of people tried to present this as somewhat similar to George Floyd. It just wasn't for so many reasons. And so as a result, both on the common sense test, but also on the law, Alvin Bragg, that's why he lost his case, and he deserved to lose it. It shouldn't have been brought.
Bill, I would underline that context that Kim gave. It does not seem like Daniel Penny was out looking for trouble that day. Trouble found him. And you can raise questions about the chokehold that he did or whether he held it for too long. But you got to ask yourself also whether these 12 jurors could sympathize with being in that kind of situation. And I think many New Yorkers, people who commute to New York, have been in situations like that where there's somebody who is acting crazy on a train. Hopefully it is a level of crazy that does not turn violent. But when you're in that kind of situation, it is hard to know how the person who is acting strangely and aggressively, how far that person is going to go. And the broad failure of New York, it seems to me, to deal with that kind of law and order problem in public places, including the subway, it puts the populace in a very difficult situation if you end up on that subway car.
Yeah, Mayor Adams alluded to that when he was talking about the case. Look, it didn't help as we got more and more into it. You saw tapes of Daniel Penny, and you learn more about Jordan Neely. And they were night and day. Jordan Neely was always in trouble with the law. He had 42 arrests. 3 were for assault. 1 was for, he was attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old. He broke the eye socket of an older woman when he punched her. He was a menace both to himself and others, and he never should have been out in the streets in the first place. As Penny said, he was a former Marine, and he said there's a myth that Marines don't get scared. He said, I was scared, but they teach you that the test is how you handle that fear. And he said he heard, he looked around, saw women and children terrified, and he said he couldn't sit still. I would think that's an instinct we want to encourage. I hear a lot, again, as a father of 3 daughters, I would like to issue a Daniel Penny every time they ride the subway. And I hear that a lot from people, lamenting that men don't stand up. But you send this signal. Why would they? A lot of parents are saying to their sons, if you see trouble, look down, avoid eye contact, and get the hell out of there. Don't get involved. Well, Daniel Penny got involved for the best of reasons, and he was treated like a criminal.